Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach, mates. Well, round six is done and dusted. Um, Collingwood and St Kilda are absolutely flying in the top two spots on the ladder. I had the highest player of the week as my vice captain, so I'm very happy. And poor old Thomas and our colleague Jonas, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, have bit of a rant with a certain Touk Miller who has found his way into both of their sides, only to be ruled out for to be determined amount of time. So that's obviously very frustrating for them. So again, the format of the show is going to be basically the same as always. We're just going to touch on a few verses, do some trade versus holds and whether or not to avoid or buy, and then the favourite topic, which is my rant at the end, which I'm going to add in Thomas and Jonas's one. So we're just going to get straight into it now. So the first one concerns the back line. So we've got Tom Stewart and Jack Sinclair. So Stewart obviously is a bit cheaper after his lower score and the fact that I think he missed some football with injury. And Sinclair obviously started off the year as the highest priced defender, and whilst he hasn't been disappointing, he's still scoring all right. Um, he hasn't been able to maintain it, so he's about the mid 550s. So where are you leaning towards with this, Thomas, and why?
Yeah, I'm in the position where I'm able to bring in one of these two this week, or I need to bring in one of these two this week, really. With regards to the situation, I mean, originally I was going to use two trades. One being probably, Mitchell and Wagner, which we'll talk about later, and then the other one being the upgrade from a rookie price defender to a Stewart or Sinclair. I had basically a choice in either or. Now having to use the boost with Miller out as well. It's a tough one because, Sinclair, having watched the game live against the Blues, has gone back to his original role in defence more. They utilise him in the midfield a little bit, so he'll go into the rotation when need be to spice it up. I know he did that in the second half against the Blues because it wasn't just working with the midfield mix. It's a tougher one. It's a 50-50 split, really, because realistically, I think Stewart's a better option, as much as it hurts me saying so. He's just super consistent. He plays the same role week in, week out, and you can kind of rely on him regardless. We're gonna release the weekly write up to our Patreon later in the next coming day or so. It's just been a bit delayed with obviously the Anzac Day games running later, but we were a little bit concerned with Stewart potentially, having a few issues playing one-on-one against the small forwards like he Papley did, which he did on Saturday, but it didn't seem to phase him that much. And he, as you see, the stat line there, 23 disposals, 7 marks, 3 tackles. He doesn't need much to score, which is really, really impressive for him. Whereas Sinclair, the biggest issue he's had this season is his ceiling. He's really struggled to hit the heights this season. He's scoring all right, don't get me wrong, and for 540k, he's dropped significantly. So is it worth a 60k to reinvest elsewhere? Who knows? But it'd be interesting to see your thoughts on this, Nathan, considering that you're not a Saints supporter, so the bias is out of it. But what are your thoughts on these two in particular?
Yeah, so I mean, I think both of these guys probably will end up in our sides, but I'm really liking Tom Stewart for this particular versus he's basically maintained his starting price. I guess there was a little bit of concern pre-season about sides perhaps trying to avoid him, given his intercept marking prowess. But I think as the Cats have got better naturally, I think he's one who's really sort of shot up a bit. Yeah, and as Thomas alluded to, I was actually at the game as well on Sunday, even though I'm not a Saints supporter or a Carlton supporter for that matter. But I did notice that in the second half, he sort of got going a bit more once he got moved into that midfield role. So we said pre-season, we know Ross Lyon hates Supercoach. And I think this is his way of hating us by not playing Jack Sinclair through the midfield like Braddon did last year. So I think because of that, I think I'm going to have to lean towards Stewart, even though Sinclair's the 60k cheap. I think you just know what you're going to get with Stewart. Whereas I think with Sinclair, I think to make him viable, he has to play that midfield role like he did in the second half. But in saying that, he's the guy that Ross Lyon is turning to if they need a little bit of flair and a little bit of speed in the midfield, which in some ways means that he's always a chance to end up in there. But obviously, we've seen with players like Jack Crisp and Jaden Short, who I think we're going to discuss in the later slide, that having that rotation can sometimes be detrimental to their scoring. So, I think in saying all of that, I think Stewart is worth the extra 60k. So that's pretty much my.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Stewart's a safer option for sure.
So moving on, Jane Short, who I actually just alluded to, obviously on a comeback from injury, and Christian Petrarca. What are we doing with this one, Thomas? Who are we leaning towards here?
I mean, this is primarily due to the fact that Miller's injured, so it's, whether you go up to your ultimate premiums like your Lairds and Olivers if you don't own, or you go to someone in a similar category, because obviously Miller's now dropped a little bit in price from last week. So Short, I think, is priced at 530k, and then Petrarca's priced at 570. Short obviously had that weird stint in previous games playing. I know this is, I think, his second game in. Am I right in saying, Nathan?
I believe it is his second game. Yeah,
and he, rather than playing pure in the midfield, it was his first time we saw him down back, and he dominated like he has been when he has been playing down back. Obviously, a downside of that is he's not eligible as a defender anymore. He's only midfield eligible. However, I'll let Nathan talk a little bit about Short, but yeah, he's a pod that you could probably consider. For me, it's probably a little bit too much a risk. This is the first time we've seen it. Fair enough if it's like a 3 to 5 game sample size, but I think if you're looking for a replacement ASAP for Miller, Short's a bit too risky, even though he is cheaper. Petrarca, I don't mind. I'm considering him as well. He's a little bit cheaper than Miller, so he's affordable regardless. Mainly because, well, he's consistent, one, but B, they have a really cushy run coming up. We mentioned in our weekly write-up, but they have, let me just scroll down.
Well, they got North Melbourne this week.
Yeah, they got North Melbourne. Then they've got, North, Suns, Hawks. So 3 absolute beat-up games. And then Port and Freo, both teams aren't doing the best at the moment. 5 really nice games, fixtures for Petrarca. And he's one that almost, Oliver's the one that they've been trying to tag in recent weeks, so he could get completely off the chain the next 5 weeks. It's obviously hard to say because in the previous 5, he hasn't been scoring highly, but he's still scoring hundreds, which is most impressive, I think, the consistency's sake, but you could see him explode soon. I think the D's probably got away with the one a little bit against the Tigers, but if they really want to contend for this season, I think they're going to probably try to rubber stamp their mark in the competition, similar to how Geelong's kind of rebounded back. And I could see Petrarca doing a similar thing where he goes bang, bang, bang. But what are your thoughts on those two, Nathan, in particular?
Yeah, so obviously Jaden Short's the interesting one here. So I'm just going to say now, I think I would be picking Petrarca out of these two. And the only reason for that is I'm not sure whether or not Jaden Short's long-term viability is off halfback. In particular, I think Daniel Rioli and Liam Baker, I think, basically have those 2 spots sewn up. That's unless Baker gets moved around. So I think the only way Jane Short would be a viable option is if he gains defender eligibility.
Yeah.
And he sort of maintains his price with sort of a bit of a consistent sort of 100, 105 scoring, because even at his price, he's 542. I just had a look. He's not going to go up and down all that much. So I think the only way he's viable, is with a defender eligibility. But in saying that, he did look back to his best. But obviously it's hard to go past Christian Petrarca. And that cushy Melbourne run actually has me considering what to do with his teammate in Clayton Oliver, who had a bit of a down game. His break even, I think I had a look pre-episode, it's about 175, Clayton Oliver. So given the fact that they have that cushy run, I think if you can have a look at Petrarca's break even, which I'll quickly do that now. I probably should have done this before the show. So Petrarca's break even is 117. So I reckon if you're gonna bring these guys in, I reckon just see how they both go against North Melbourne, and if they're gonna tear it apart, like even Petrarca, even if he comes out with a 140, which I think against North Melbourne he could comfortably do that, his price point isn't really gonna go up that much because of that higher break even.
Yeah.
And even the same with Clayton Oliver. Like even if he scores 180, he's not gonna skyrocket. But I guess the problem with Oliver is that you then have to find the 670 odd K to bring him in. Whereas with Petrarca, he's only probably gonna go up to about 590 with the score of about that 130, 140 mark. So yeah, I think in that case, I think I would be going towards Petrarca, but I think if Short gains defender eligibility, I think that might change this topic completely. So yeah, moving on here. So Rowan Marshall, who I think has frustrated a lot of people with his yo-yo scoring, and Todd Goldstein, who sort of is winding back the clock a bit this year under Clarko. Where were we? This is a bit of an interesting one, actually. Where were we leaning towards this one, Thomas?
Obviously, they're two flip sides of a coin, essentially trading one out and trading one in, going real risky with Goldie. I'll probably give a little bit of insight with Marshall. He's one that, I guess he's been a little bit disappointing or underwhelming per se. Everyone thought, solo right, guaranteed 130s, which he's produced a few of them, but he's kind of, he's not reliant so much as anymore to dominate games for St Kilda to win. It's been much more a team effort. Having said that, he's not one that will dominate hit-outs and hit-outs to advantages. He's one that does a lot of follow-up work around the ground. I think with him, the problem he had, let me just bring up the stats quickly from the Carlton St Kilda game. Like if you look at his stat line, he only went at 52% disposal efficiency. If he cleans that up a bit, that's a 130 game hands down. Unfortunately, as a ruckman, when you get disposed, it's pretty much just dump it on the boot and hope for the best little bit.
Pretty much.
But yeah, he's one that I think will grow into the season nicely. I don't think you could trade him, but it'd be a shitload of cash to try and get him to an English. It's probably not worthwhile. Everyone has him pretty much. So he's one you just keep on going with. I mean, they play Port this weekend on a Friday night against probably not. It's if they go Teakle or they go to Lysette. So either or, it's not the greatest ruck duo or ruck options for Port. So he could go pretty big there, but he's one that, as soon as he cleans up his disposal efficiency, is a pretty good option. With regards to Goldie, I'll let Nathan elaborate a little bit more, but he's one that's, wound back the clock with Clarko. Wasn't favoured round one, but I think he's come back with a fire in his belly a little bit, and he's hit some pretty high scores, and consistency-wise is a little bit up and down, but he's hit those, or he's still capable of those high scores, winding back the Goldie of old. Obviously played his 300th last week, which could have something to do with it, but, to get 130 against Wits is no easy feat, and he was definitely the better ruckman there, even though North got pumped. But that's probably the one thing that holds Goldie back, is just because of how bad North travel in the last couple of years. It just impacts his scoring sometime a little bit.
Yeah, so obviously Goldie a few years ago was the number one ruckman. In fact, I think it was even the number one player in Supercoach about 6 or 7 years ago. So I guess he does have a history of high scoring, but I think it's just his age now. I think he's a bit older. He's probably doesn't get around the ground as well as he used to. But I guess the one advantage he does have is he is a high hit out ruckman, and North Melbourne. If there's one strength of North Melbourne, it is that midfield group. They've got LDU in there, Cunnington's in there, Jai Simpkins in there. They can rotate Zerha through there, Zeeble on the odd occasion. So, I guess for Goldie, he's got that going. But I think with these two, I think you've probably picked them at the start expecting them to be keepers. And given the absolute carnage at the start of the year with injury and now it's been compounded with Touk Miller, unless you have basically no injuries and you've still got, maybe 25 plus trades, um, and you've got no rookies on the field, like you've got Hopper at M8, you've got Sheasel at D6 or F6, you're probably just going to have to stick with these two until you've got all your rookies off the field. I mean, Marshall, look, he's not setting the house on fire, but he's scoring, around where he was priced to score. Goldie's, scoring a little bit better than that, but I just don't think at this stage it would be wise to spend the 170 odd K or whatnot to get rid of one of these two and go up to Tim English, who for all intents and purposes is one, average game away from a drop, and then if he follows up again, then it's a massive drop. So I'm just not sure whether or not going down that path at this particular stage is wise. But as I said, if you've got no issues elsewhere, it might be something worth considering. But for my position, and I'm sure this is the same with Thomas, I think we're just going to have to stick with Marshall, or if you've got Goldie, just stick with them. And yeah, just hope that they can sort of maintain their scoring, even if they up it slightly, until the buys come, and then you might revisit that. Is that sort of where you're going towards, Thomas?
With regards to Marshall, you said.
Yeah. So with regards to trading these guys out for English, if that's what you want to do, keeping them till the buy.
Probably, I'd say it's definitely too late now to jump on English.
Yeah,
it's frustrating.
690 odd K, I think.
It's basically two trades to even get up there. Well, yeah, two trades, one up, one down. So you got to treat Marsh as a rookie in some regards as a one up, one down policy. Who the Dogs play this week? I mean,
he's 683K. The Dogs are playing Hawthorn at Marvel.
Oh, fuck me dead. He's going to get another 150 there. So it's an automatic vice captaincy option there. I think at this point, you just cop it. Unfortunately, you're just going to lose out points and hope your essential R1. So for me, it's Darcy can maintain the scoring that he has been at match English's scoring. I'd be a little bit more concerned if you had Marshall and Grundy per se and went the value route, or you had Marshall and someone else. I think then you'd be shitting bricks a little bit and just say, fuck it, I need to get money in the bank as quick as possible, and see if you can get there that way. But I guess in a position like most people are, myself included, with Darcy's R1, you just hope that he holds out and scores. Like when they played against each other, Darcy went berserk. So if he can maintain the same scoring as English or do one better, then it's a bonus. But I think if you're looking to move on Marshall to English, you'd be in a pretty unique position, I think, to do so. I just don't think it's worth it. Almost 200k up. You'd rather get another premium on field and get rid of a rookie first and worry about it later. Because who knows, English could get injured at any point, and then he drops back down in price, so it's a shit game. So yeah, it's a tough one, but surely at some point you'll be able to manage it another way that's not 200k more expensive.
Yeah, and it's interesting you actually mentioned about missing out on English, because it's frustrating actually for me watching Jeremy Cameron do what he's doing, because he was someone that I actually had my eye on at the start of the year. There's a bit of point of difference around that 500k mark with Golden and Taranto and those guys, and it's frustrating watching Cameron just basically tear every game apart. And we've definitely missed the boat on him. But yeah, I guess you're in the same boat here. With these two, with English, is I think you just got to persist with them. Moving on, so Mitch Owens, who sort of is shot out of the blue this year, I think he's risen about 250 odd K. He's almost now in the calculations for perhaps being a keeper, and obviously he's Cornelio, who's fallen a bit in price, now below 500k, but I think this is a week for Cornelio if you want him. Where are you leaning towards in this battle, Thomas?
Bias aside, well, I don't know. Owens, I probably should have jumped on when I said I would, and then I missed out, and he's now 400 and plus K.
Yeah.
This is probably the last week you can probably hop on him, because of his, increase in price rise. I think his break even 7, and could do quite well against Port on the weekend.
He break even 63.
Oh, is it 63? I thought it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, he's one that I guess you want to jump on now if you don't want to get to 450k plus.
He's 454.
Is he okay? Yeah. So
he's 454 already.
Is he? I thought he was.
Nah, he's 454 now. He was 405 last week.
Oh, they might not. Yeah, where I'm looking at must not have updated. Yeah. So he's in the premium-ish category, which is concerning a little bit, but shows how good he's been playing in the last couple of weeks and shows how versatile. I think the big positive with him is he's pushing up the ground more often. They even play him as essentially as a backup ruckman, and he's doing pretty well in that as well. He's having a fair chance of getting a tit out, and also his follow-up work is pretty insane for a 19-year-old kid. Cogs, yeah, he dropped in price a little bit because of his shit scores, but now he bounced back. The only concern, I'll let Nathan elaborate a little bit on Cogs, but the only concern I have with him is whether, Green was out that game with suspension, so whether or not when Green comes back, does that impact his scoring? But yeah, Cogs, I think, just because Owens has risen up in price, if Owens was at his, base price of 250 or 350, I'd be more enticing to do so, but you're looking at a 40k price rise for Cogs, who's a proven scorer. So I think Cogs is the obvious one here, but if you want to have some fun this season, Owens is definitely a fun player to watch, and that's coming from a Saints fan. So I've seen a fair bit of Owens in the last 6 weeks, and he's an insane player to watch at full flight, how mobile he is at his height. But what are your thoughts, Nathan, on these two?
Yeah, well, as I said, I was at the game on Sunday, and it's interesting watching Owens, actually, because he seemed to play like a 7th midfielder from the forward line, where he sort of started on the centre half forward line, and basically ran into the midfield, and he was used as sort of that outlet link on the other wing to Bradley Hill. So I think the role's there for him. I guess the only question is I did have a look back through his scoring, and there were a couple of 70s and 60s there. But in saying that, I think the forwards this year, outside of a few of them, are going to have those games. And I'll ask Stephen Cornelia, who I think's also had a few of those games. But I think purely based on history, I think I'm going to lean towards Cornelia here. I think you know what you need. I think you know what you're going to get with Cornelia. You're going to get a honest effort. He mainly playing in the midfield. So yeah, I think the 499k. I think that's probably hopefully going to be the cheapest he'll get this year. I think his break even's about 70 something. So yeah, I think for this one here, I think I'm going to lean towards Cornelio. But as Thomas alluded to, if you wanted to go the point of difference option, if you think Owens can keep up this scoring for the rest of the year, then by all means go for Owens. But I think for mine, I think I'm going to lean towards Cornelio, just because I know what I'm going to get with Cornelio.
Yeah, handle 100%.
So moving on. So I got a couple of rookies in here. So Seamus Mitchell and Corey Wagner. So both of these guys are bubble boys this week. I think Seamus Mitchell is 123k defender forward, and Corey Wagner I think is 117k midfield defender. Um, what do we think about bringing these two in, Thomas? Obviously there are a couple of questions with I guess both of these guys with obviously Will Day missing and with Wagner obviously with Fremantle needing to change some stuff given their poor start. So what do we think about the viability of these two?
Yeah, I wasn't too hot on Mitchell, thinking it was a bit of a flash in the pan with his score, but he definitely was more impressive on the second game based off what small snippets of that game I saw. Played off a half back, so he's playing more defensive minded rather than in the midfield. So it doesn't seem like it's a complete like for like swap with Day, but obviously Day used to play in the back line, so you can understand where the logic comes in there. Yeah, he's been impressive. 15 disposals, 6 marks. Really impressive score. Obviously, the Hawks had a close one, so when you go to a blowout game, does that change? Who knows? But I don't know what your thoughts on this. Obviously, we were I think all of us brought in Roberts and Johnson as a double downgrade, thinking we need to get these rookies in, and all of a sudden they both blow up in our faces. So I don't think both of them this week's probably not a good idea, based off the precedence that's been set. Wagner, I paid a close attention to, because I had him in AFL fantasy, so he was one I paid a little bit more attention to, having watched. Well, I did watch the whole of that Freo Dogs game, but it was one that he slowed down a lot after quarter time. So he went very impressive in the first quarter. He basically played Nathan Wilson role-esque, not as explosive rebounding, but it was often that first outlet from fullback. Having said that, his disposal is pretty shocking. He can't really kick a footy that well, but he scored purely based on the amount of ball he got. He, I think, was on close to 30 at quarter time, so that probably shows his consistency over 4 quarters. Because he completely died out over that, and he seemed a little bit lost, especially when the ball went the other way defensively. If I had to pick the two, I'd probably go Mitchell. So this is all dependent on whether they get named tomorrow, but I'd probably say Mitchell's the way to go. I'm hoping, fingers crossed for my sake, he's got DPP eligible. Defensive forwards don't come around often. And worst comes to worst, if he plays a couple more games and dies off, I think that defensive forward eligibility is quite useful. But yeah, he's one that I think I'd be more comfortable with, purely based on the fact that, Hawks are going to be pretty stringent on playing those younger kids with their development there at, whereas Freo need to really rebound at some point to rejig their season. I don't know if Wagner's it, but you could do worse with getting Wagner if you went early on Mitchell. I think with the amount of ball that Freo get in their defensive one, how much they like to flip the ball around, probably Wagner's not a bad shout. But what are your thoughts, Nathan, on these two? And if you're going to bring any one of them in?
Well, right now I've got them both. I've had to bring them both in to get Cornelio.
Yeah.
But I would lean towards Mitchell, given that he's got he's got a lower break even and he's more expensive. Which normally it's the other way around. So, I guess there is the question mark over Will Day, but I think Will Day's been spending a lot of time through the midfield, as opposed to on the back line. So I don't think if Mitchell's playing off halfback, which he seems to be, I'm not sure if Will Day's going to impact him too much. But obviously there is the question mark there with him. We haven't seen them both on the same side yet. And obviously, as I alluded to, I think Fremantle just need to completely reset their game plan. And I think they basically just need to almost throw this season away now. I know what it'll cost them, given the fact that their first round pick's tied to Luke Jackson, which means that Melbourne would be absolutely loving this, given that they could potentially win the premiership this year and have a top 5 pick to go along with it. But I think for the long term of Fremantle, I think they They got to do something to arrest this game plan because it's just stagnant. Sides are just, as soon as there's any pace on the ball, Fremantle just get turned around too easily. And as soon as Fremantle get the ball, I think this is a bit of a homework lesson from Collingwood in the semi-final last year, where sides are just flooding completely back against them, and they're just happy to let Fremantle just chip the ball around the back line. And then once the ball gets turned over, they're just going hell and leather to score. And Fremantle just can't seem to cope with that sort of thing. So I think normally I would say Wagner because he's in the better side, and they sort of need to keep the side enthusiastic and young. But given where Fremantle are at, I think they're just got to basically try and pick the best players for their position, and I don't think Wagner's in that best
No, I agree.
thing. So I think Mitchell has a bit more job security, given that Hawthorn have basically openly said that they're going to, I wouldn't say throw away the next, 3-4 years, but they're clearly in a rebuild phase with their younger players. And, if they can keep sort of sides, relatively close. I think the Tassie games in particular for them this year, I think they will really try and target those Tassie games as a win. They've got a great record down there. Adelaide were in terrific form, and they basically needed a 1% shot from the boundary line to win the game against Hawthorn down there. So, I think for me, I would be going Mitchell out of these two, just purely based on sides and where they're at. Trade versus.
I was going to say I'll take over from here, because I haven't actually put in the question. So, for the overrated, underrated segment, I'll get Nathan obviously quick fire thoughts. We'll keep this nice and short. Because we've touched over a few of these issues already in previous episodes and obviously earlier today. Overrated, underrated number one is obviously with the popularity of bringing these two guys in. I think on Twitter, Supercoach Bull retweeted our photo saying that if you're not sure who these blokes are, you use this as a cue. So hopefully by this weekend you're well aware of who these blokes are, because they probably burnt half your fucking sides. So, now you're well aware who they are, so it's good to see that they've made themselves known. But Roberts and Johnson. Johnson was always a kind of a risky one that probably was going to blow up in people's faces eventually. But Roberts was unlucky because he looked like he was going to do okay, and he kind of shit the bed with an injury, and he's out for a while with a medial injury. But Nathan, is this a situation where you've brought these rookies in, rosy days, you've got your upgrade sorted, and all of a sudden they're making shit all cash because A, they've scored poorly, or B, they're now injured for a long, long time? Overrated, underrated, trading them the week after you've just brought them in?
Well, I think this is underrated because I've actually done this with Roberts, because I just needed that extra 30k to get Cornelio in. So I wanted to do Connor McKenna out for Cornelio, and I just fell a couple of K short. And obviously, because he's made a little bit of money, it's not much, but he's made sort of 40, 50k. The fact that he's a midfield forward, and I think most people have abundance of midfield forwards, I've actually moved him on to get the money to get Cornelio in. And Johnson, I like Johnson's role. He just didn't score well. I think Fremantle just got overwhelmed in the end by the Bulldogs. So I think I'm gonna say if they get injured and they've had one price rise, I think it's okay to get rid of them, especially if it's a long-term one. But if they're like the sub, or they just have a shit game, I think you've just got to ride that they're rookies and they're young kids, most of them, so they're going to have these up and down games. So Yeah, to answer the question though about that, I'm gonna say it's underrated.
Yeah, nah, 100% agree. We'll move on to the next one, nice and quickly. Yeah, two rookies who debuted on the weekend, Ryan Angwin, and he's 123k midfielder, I believe. And Alex Chincotta, who, yeah, was on a lot of people's radars and was a lot of people's round one teams, but is played really well on the weekend from what I saw, played off that half back line. Obviously, we know Doherty inside, which is an asterisk to his name, but he looked pretty impressive, pretty confident off half back. You probably wouldn't have known if he was a debut if no one told you. Angwin, I don't have too much data on, but he did score pretty okay. What are your thoughts on bringing these? Well, I'm using these two as a sample size, but bringing a rookie who scored relatively well round one, looks like he's probably going to hold for the next couple of weeks. Early, if you're not a fan of the rookies available now, you believe there's not many rookies coming soon, you want to get that quick cash grab to get to a premium if you need be. Overrated, underrated with that.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. This is the most overrated statement in Supercoach. You should never, ever bring a rookie in before they're on the bubble and have been named for their third game. Because right now, if you trade in these twos, and there's a famous story about 6 or 7 years ago, I've forgotten the guy's name, but it was a Gold Coast Suns player, and he scored 100 in his first game, and everyone jumped on him. And then he got injured in his second game. I think he missed the rest of the year. He scored about 15 points. And everyone who jumped on him basically had a dead rookie for the rest of the year. So you are running a massive risk if you're bringing in these two guys before they've played 2 games and they're named for their third game. Because if one of these guys goes down, and especially Chincotta, given that he's 102k, you're going to have absolutely nothing to show for it. And if you're scratching around later on in the year and money's tight and trade is tight, that, having a rookie who's played the 3 games and has gone up in value could be the difference between you being able to get someone who you need, as opposed to having a dead rookie because you traded them in after 1 game and they got injured. So yeah, this statement is massively overrated, and I don't care who they are, how well they score in their first game. They could score 250. It will not matter for me. I will never bring in someone until they've played their second game, because you are running a massive risk if these 2 guys get injured.
Yeah.
And given what's happened I think last week with Roberts and Johnson, I should serve even more of a warning that these rookies can score really well first up and then they drop off. So I'm going to say this is probably the most overrated statement in Supercoach, is bringing in a rookie off 1 game.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I wouldn't risk it either. Moving on to the final overrated, underrated for this week. This is an interesting one, especially with the like of Touk Miller going down and pretty much all owners need to trade ASAP. What are your thoughts on bringing in players who, A, are point of differences, but B, are maybe slightly cheaper, not quite hit the 600k point, but if you're looking at these two as a sample size, Danger and Sarong have gone bang for the first 5 to 6 weeks, bar 1 or 2 poorer scores, but have basically matched your Olivers and the like quite well, and they're rising quite heavily due to some big scores. What are your thoughts on bringing these kind of players in to kind of reinvest your cash elsewhere? I know both these are kind of hyped up a little bit because they've risen up a little bit significantly with their higher scores, but what are your thoughts on this sentiment?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to say this is an underrated statement. I'm going to say underrated on a case by case basis. So I think Sarong, he's probably too expensive now to justify that, given I think he's nearly 600k. And I think most of those bigger midfielders like Oliver and Bont and stuff are only about 50k more expensive. And I think they're probably going to be more reliable long term. But if they were sort of another 50k cheaper than Sarong, so you're sort of looking around that 540, 550k mark. If they're scoring well enough, um, it's probably it probably could be not a bad thing to bring one of them in. I would probably only do it with one of these type of player. I wouldn't be doing it like with all 8. Like I wouldn't be bringing in Sarong and Dangerfield and Pendlebury and Sidebottom. I think doing that's too risky. But I mean, the way that Dangerfield's going, he sort of looks a bit like he's about 2019, 2020 again. He looks sort of a bit reinvigorated. I think perhaps the burden of being the captain perhaps overwhelmed him a little bit in those first couple of weeks. And I think they mentioned on Fox Footy, I think David King might have mentioned it. They all thought he was trying to be doing too much. But I think the last few weeks, I think he's sort of just gone back to what he's best at doing, which is a bit like a Tom Mitchell sort of role at Collingwood, where he's sort of the one player who goes in and gets the ball, and then when he gets it on the outside, he's able to burst away. So I mean, he took off on one of his Dangerfield-esque runs on Saturday night, which I haven't seen that from Danger all year.
No.
I guess the only downside to Dangerfield now is his age, and whether or not he can keep it up. But just for these two in particular, I think Sarong, I think you've missed the boat on. I think he's, as I said, he's nearly 600k. But I had a look at Dangerfield. I think he's around that 540 mark.
Yeah. He's about 544, I believe.
Yeah, so I wouldn't mind taking a punt on Dangerfield, given that Geelong, and this I'm going to mention this about just Jeremy Cameron in the same boat as well, that Geelong have 8 games left at GMHBA Stadium out of their, I don't know how many are left, what have we got left? 16, 17?
17, it's about half, yeah.
So they've got 8 games at GMHBA Stadium, and if that stadium is the biggest home advantage in the AFL, I think they've lost about 7 of their last 50 games down there. That ground is so hard to play on, but the thing with the Geelong players is that they play that ground so well that it's almost at the point now where it's worth taking a punt on some of these Geelong players, because given the fact that they play so well down there, and I'll even throw Tom Stewart in the same basket as well, but because they play so well down there, that I believe that the Geelong at GMHBA Stadium is the biggest home ground advantage in the AFL. And they know how to score down there. So, yeah, I would be cautiously tempted by Dangerfield if you've got a Miller and you want to sort of downgrade him if you can't quite go up to Oliver or someone. I think those Geelong midfielders, Dangerfield, he's probably the number one. But in terms of the question, I'm going to say, underrated on a case-by-case basis.
No, 100% agree. I think Danger is probably in genuine conversations this week with regards to Miller's trading options, because the first 2 games where he was very poor, and as was Geelong, he's gone 103, 119, 118 and 144. So he's just gone bang thereafter. But we'll move on to finish off the episode with our favourite segment. Whilst Nathan's revving himself up, we'll just quickly move across to what we're talking about. So I'll let Nathan talk about this, about Lachie Neale in particular, which I think he's brought in this week. So we'll let him loose for the next 5 minutes, and we'll see what ends up.
I'll just quickly touch on the Geelong fixture as well. So this week they've got Essendon at the MCG, and then they've got Adelaide in Geelong. They've got Richmond at the MCG, who aren't doing that well. They've got Fremantle in Perth, who aren't doing that well. GWS at GMH at Geelong, the Bulldogs at Marvel, who for some reason Geelong seem to have a great record against the Bulldogs, regardless of where they play. And then they've got their bye. So I think there's a few really good games in there for Dangerfield to really cement his scoring. But my rant for the week. So, Mr. Lockie Neal, I'm coming for you, my friend. And I know you might be a Brownlow medalist. I know you might be a runner-up last year, although I think you should have won it because I will maintain to this day that Patrick Cripps should have been rubbed out for that hit on whoever was the Brisbane defender. But seriously, you played against in fact I've forgotten who they even played against. That's how wheeled up I am. They played against the GWS Giants and they kicked 108 points. And I don't know where you were, Lockie. I had a look in there and you just didn't seem interested. You seemed like you were more interested in trying to flop your body around to get someone suspended as opposed to actually doing what you do best, which is going in and grabbing the ball. So, Lockie, I want to see the game that you played last week against North Melbourne. I want to see that repeated and get some consistency in your game, because otherwise you will end up in the same position that Thomas and Jonas are in with Touk Miller, where I'm cancelling my Supercoach season because it's just not on, Lockie. You got to be scoring 120. Second rant. I'm going to do this on behalf of Thomas and Jonas. I'm not a fan of this, but they wanted me to mention Touk Miller. I don't like potting players to get injured. It's not fair on them, but he was only on 35 points midway through the third quarter. So even if he didn't get injured, he probably would have ended up in here anyway. But I think the lights have gone out for Touk this year. And I think now he's burnt everyone. And my third rant this week is, as I said, I was at the Carlton St Kilda game on Sunday with my father, who is a Carlton supporter, and I was at 3/4 time like, Carlton, they're only down by 21 points. And they've been playing this really slow, crappy brand of football that just doesn't get you anywhere. And I said to Dad at 3/4 time, I said, you guys have to go here. And what I watched in the last quarter was probably one of the most boring, insipid efforts of a side trying to mount a comeback. And there's some Carlton supporters out there who've actually been happy with how their season's gone. Now, I'm calling absolute rubbish on that. Given that forward line you've got, West Coast have scored more points than Carlton this year. Now for a side that's got 2 Coleman medalists, a Brownlow medalist, a number 1 pick who is arguably the best fullback in the league in Jacob Wiedering, and they've got a dominant tap ruckman. They've got all that midfield talent, and yet a side who basically has 25 fit players has outscored them this year. And then alluding to the comeback, 48 hours later, basically to the dot, Collingwood absolutely turned it on against Essendon and kicked 7 goals. And I came home and I said to Dad, the first thing I said to him was, why didn't you guys do what we did in the last quarter? They could have easily done what Collingwood did, Carlton. And for whatever reason, they just chose to keep chipping the ball around and maintain possession. And it just played into St Kilda's hands because they weren't going to go and attack in the last quarter. That's not how Ross Lyon coaches. So I don't know what's going on down at Carlton. They've got the worst percentage in the top 8, and they've got all that forward line. And for whatever reason, it's just not firing. So if I'm a Carlton supporter, I would be absolutely furious with how the side's gone this year, given that most people were expecting Carlton to be a top 4 side. And the fact that for whatever reason, this slow, boring game just isn't suiting their forward line. They kicked They kicked 4 goals 3 from free kicks on the weekend. Now, I'll guarantee you now that if Carlton makes September, they're not going to be doing anything if they're getting half their goals from free kicks. We know the free kicks dry up in the finals. So even if they make the finals, I don't know how confident I could be based on that sort of ratio with free kicks to their scoring that they could do that they're going to actually do any damage. It seems to be Charlie Curnow or bust at the minute. Mackay can't kick a goal. He just needs to, spend the preseason 6-8 weeks just fixing up his technique because it is horrendous. They've got nothing out of Cripps. He doesn't seem to be doing as well this year. So Carlton Football Club, you guys need to start showing the potential that you have, which is a lot better than what you have been showing, given the fact that you've got a side who's 17th on the ladder that's outscored you, and they've basically got no players to pick from. So, Carlton, my big expectation on you, lift this week. I don't know who you're playing. I can't tell you that, but I know you're playing West Coast in Perth. So if you lose to West Coast in Perth, I'm just about ready to write a line through you guys as being a genuine contender this year. And we're only, 8 weeks in, and that would be we're starting to get into territory now where we're discussing here. Could Carlton possibly sack Michael Voss? I'm going to put this to you, Thomas, just quickly. If Carlton miss out on the 8 again this year, do you think that Michael Voss is a chance of getting sacked?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think you nailed it on the head. Obviously I was at the game as well, and I've never seen a mass exodus of Carlton supporters leave when you're 20 points down, as St Kilda were 25 points down with 2 minutes to go and almost snatched it off you guys. So, it's one of those things where I think enough's enough. They've gone through that heartbreak last year of just missing out on finals pretty cruelly, but ultimately to their own regard by stuffing up a few games they should have won. And this year they've just don't look it at all. As you said, they've got 2 twin towers pretty much up front. They get gifted free kicks for fun. So what more can you expect from a side like Carlton as a supporter? You're bloody frustrated when you've got a stacked midfield. I think it's their defence is the biggest issue at the moment. I think that's always been the knock that I have had on Carlton. They have had Jacob Weirdoon, but basically the next best key defender is not it. McGovern's a makeshift key defender.
Well, I'm just going to interrupt you there because defensively they're actually quite strong this year. I think they're actually a top 6 side defensively this year.
Yeah,
so it's their forward. They just can't attack. It's almost like the same conversation with Fremantle, in that Fremantle are doing it without those twin towers down there. So I would say on paper Carlton have a better side than Fremantle, given that they've got the twin towers there. But yeah, for whatever reason, it's just not showing at the minute. So
no, 100% agree. I guess time will tell. If they lose against West Coast, but for whatever stupid reason, I think alarm bells will be ringing ASAP. But that's all we got time for. It's been a little bit of a longer episode, but it was a fair bit to get through. Hopefully you get. Oh, before we forget, with regards, completely forgot about this. With regards to the giveaway, we decided to push it forward another week, just because we've had lack of entries. So if you want to have a chance of winning the giveaway opportunities, we've pushed it back one more week, just to see if there's any more interest. I know it's a little bit different and a little bit niche compared to your regular, probably AFL content. But yeah, it's an opportunity to win some stuff and a bit of a thank you for the support. So we'll push it back one more week. So same deal, same rules apply to all the other weeks. And yeah, we'll announce that in due course. For now, good luck with the upcoming round. I know there's a bit of carnage this week, but hopefully you guys can sort it out with your teams. As I said, myself and Jonas were in exactly the same position as probably half the pool with the disaster week we had with regards to Miller captaining and kind of costing us a little bit. But yeah, we bounce back stronger next week. And until then, we'll see you next week.